As we think of the 50 years of organized church music in the state of Texas, we need to realize that 32 of these years we have had the assistance and help of a man named Sam Prestidge. Sam, I believe, came to the department in 1961. He became the associate or helper, assistant to Pete Forterhayes, serving 32 years up until this date. However, in 1970, he became head of the department. We've seen a number of outstanding things happen, exciting things in the area of church music that have made church music what it is today. Sam, we'd like to hear a little about your background, growing up, and talk a little about your own roots, and then we'll talk about the roots of church music.
Ronnie, it's as I think back on the heritage that I have as a Texas Baptist church musician, I'm grateful for the family that gave me the opportunity to do this kind of thing. I was born in Rio Vista, Texas. It's Rio Vista if you're not from there, down in Johnson County, about 40 miles south of Fort Worth. My dad served the little church there as the volunteer music director. He came through his training in music in a rather common way back then, as he studied the old Shake Note Stamps Baxter school with L.D. Huffstutler was his teacher. Dr. E. Leslie Carlson was our pastor at the little church there. He served as professor in Southwestern Seminary. Came down, rode the train down twice a month, was our pastor. He had a background of music from Moody Bible Institute, and he was very helpful to my dad in keeping him on the straight and narrow path as far as what we knew as true gospel music then, keeping out of the church the Stamps Baxter. My dad sang in a quartet on every Tuesday night at the Johnson County Courthouse. They had a singing. My dad sang in a quartet there. And I remember going to those singings and some of the Fifth Sunday singings. But I grew up with that background. When I was about 13 years of age, 14 years of age, Dr. Jesse Northcutt was our pastor. He also was a professor at the seminary. And along about November, December of 1943, I felt God's calling to some type of church vocation work. And not knowing at the time, I went down. It was an answer to prayer to my mother and dad, who was trying to decide about whether to go to Dallas to another job. And because of that decision, they felt that it was of the Lord and they should go to Dallas, where I might perhaps get a better education, be in a larger church situation, so forth. So we moved to Dallas in January 1944. Went to East Grand Baptist Church. And that church had a great influence on my life. I went to Woodrow Wilson High School, graduated, went on to Baylor, studied music, got a degree in music at Baylor, music education. Went on to the seminary, got my master's degree in sacred music there, and went to San Antonio as minister of music at Baptist Temple Church in San Antonio. While I was in Baylor, I had the opportunity of serving First Baptist Church McGregor with Brother Ed Laux as my pastor. That was my first church. I served there a year, and the next year I served the North Side Baptist Church in Corsicana. When I went to seminary, the second semester, I was called to the First Baptist Church in Seymour, Texas, where I served for 27 months. And when I finished seminary, I went from the seminary in First Baptist Church, Seymour, to Baptist Temple in San Antonio.
Sam, when did you come to the department?
I came to the department in 1961. Floyd McCoy had been serving as associate to Mr. Ford Hayes, and he had left the department. And I had been serving as an associational music director and as district music director in that area down there, and had worked very closely with Pete. And it seemed like a natural thing to do for me, to go and to work with Pete, because I was working with associations. I had the privilege of working with 118 associations over the state. At that time, our associations were divided into districts, and we had district music festivals. When Dr. Riddle began the festival program, it was in the area of districts. And Pete Porter Hayes came along and continued that practice, refined it somewhat. I think in about 57 we had 17 districts and we had 17 district festivals. By the time I came to the department, we were having several more festivals than that. For instance, one district might have 3 or 4 festivals. So the festival program continued to develop. And Pete Porter Hayes has said the festival program has probably meant more to church music in Texas than just about any other program. We worked with associations and with districts in developing leadership training, the festival program. Of course, I assisted Mr. Porter Hayes in all of these activities. Jack Terrell came to the department, was in charge of graded choir work and small church work, and the 3 of us served as a team to serve the churches in Texas. We've had as many as 200 festivals in 1 year in our state, conducted in associations. We not only had district festivals, and they became associational festivals when the district program was changed to an area program, but we've had state festivals, and these have been very meaningful. The State Youth Choir festivals were held on Baptist college campuses. It got the youth from our churches on the Baptist college campuses, and that's where Dr. Porter, Dr. Jack Dean, and those who were involved in the colleges became very influential on these young people. These young people not only came from the churches and went to the festivals on the campuses, but eventually went to those campuses to college. And it was a very meaningful thing to have our state youth choir festivals on college campuses. We also started children's festivals, state children's choir festivals. They were held on Saturdays all over the state. It's difficult to have one of anything in Texas. We call them state festivals, but they were actually regional in various sections over the state. And these grew in the 1960s under the leadership of Pete Porter Hayes. These became wonderful experiences for our young people, for our children, and they grew tremendously. That was the heyday of the festival program. Another program that was started was the Youth Music Workshop on the campus of Houston Baptist University. And this was designed to reach some of the more talented young people in our state and to provide for them some special training and spiritual motivation. And that proved to be a wonderful thing and was the forerunner of our all-state program that we have now.
Sam, I think most ministers of music would agree, and we heard discussed at the Minister of Music retreat by Lloyd Hawthorne and by others, that this particular project of All-State Choir is doing a lot to encourage the local youth choirs that have suffered some in the last few years to regain some momentum.
Well, let me just say that all that we've been doing in these past several years has been built on the foundation of the 50s and 60s, the programs that went on in our state. The all-state choir program began in 1976. It was really a new thing, but it was something that we'd talked about for several years. It was not necessarily my idea. It came from several people. I first remember Leroy Yarber talking about us having an all-state choir. So in 1976, we decided we'd try it. And we had our first all-state choir on the campus of Dallas Baptist University. And the purpose, of course, was to bring the more talented young people together, give them special training, special opportunities for ministry, and to provide an opportunity for them to be acquainted with other talented young people from over the state. And we started it in connection with the Youth Evangelism Conference program. And actually we had one of the Bible teachers from the Youth Evangelism Conference program come and teach the Bible for us each day. We sang for the Youth Evangelism Conference on Friday night and Saturday morning. And we did this for 3 years, meeting on the campus of Dallas Baptist University. It was our hope that we'd be able to get to all of our campuses. So far, we've been on 7 of our 8 Baptist college campuses. Next year, we'll be on our 8th campus, and we're grateful for that opportunity. We do feel that because of the opportunity of this special training, this spiritual motivation and enrichment that this program provides for them, that they go back to their church with a renewed vigor, a renewed determination to do something in their church, in the youth choir area. It inspires also, I think, music directors to take advantage of this special training and the leaders that they have come back and help them. 1978, the All-State Band was started. So now we have an all-state band, an all-state choir.
Where did the workshop at Baylor University, how did this get started? Some people refer to this now as Little Glorietta.
Well, I'll have to go back to the 60s when we were doing regional workshops. We took about a 2-week tour trying to make several areas of the state from year to year with a 2-day workshop. Also, the music workshop at the seminary was designed to reach the more professional church musician, and they encouraged us to one year to begin to maybe come to Fort Worth in the summer and have a workshop for specifically children's choir leaders. And we did that, and it was successful. It showed us what could be done in this area. And rather than stay in Fort Worth, we went to Waco and used the facilities of Baylor University and started the Church Music Conference, we call it, in 1980. We designed it basically for children's choir directors to emphasize this area. We were hoping to have 200 to 300, and we had more than that the first year. And since that time, it has grown. We've added keyboard, we've added handbells, we've added classes for organist and pianist, the small church organist, small church pianist. We've added classes for the minister of music. One year, Glorietta Music Week turned down 2,200 people because they did not have room for them. And so that was about the time we began to really enlarge the program on the Baylor campus. And we thought about calling it a mini Glorietta because we did it so that we could reach a lot of people who did not have the opportunity to go to Glorietta for the leadership training.
Sam, the Singing Men of Texas has taken on a different light, direction. There's a lot of excitement among the ministers of music about the satellite singing groups. Tell us how this operates and how did this all get started?
Well, back in the 60s and early 70s, of course, our churches began to call ministers of music and just about anywhere we go in Texas, we could have a group of minister music, put them together and have a good choir. And we did that many times. And at the evangelism conference, we would bring together music directors. We'd rehearse at our ministers' music retreat and sing for the evangelism conference. Many of our state conventions had organized groups or organized choirs of ministers of music, and we'd never had really an organized group in Texas. So we began to talk about it in the early 70s. In 1974, we came up with the idea of having 5 choirs because of the fact you can't have one of anything in Texas, the distance you have to travel. So we invited 5 people to direct these choirs. Harlan Hall, East Texas; Thad Roberts, Southeast Texas; Lanny Allen, South Texas; Bill Green in West Texas; Bill Pearson in North Central Texas. We brought these men together and talked about the opportunities that we had. We sent out a letter of invitation to all of our music directors in Texas to meet in their areas at a certain time. And we came together, talked to them about the opportunities, the possibility of having an organized group, and really began that day rehearsing and singing together. From time to time, we would bring the directors together, discuss the work. We didn't have a name for the Singing Men of Texas at that time, so we had a little program of asking guys to send in suggested names. And we must have received 70 or 80 suggestions. Several people suggested the Singing Men of Texas, which we liked, which we eventually chose. And we called each one of the satellite choirs, for instance, the Singing Men of East Texas, the Singing Men of South Texas. When we come together, they're the Singing Men of Texas. At that time, we thought we wanted a director for the Singing Men of Texas combined. We invited Kurt Kaiser, Waco, to be our director, and he graciously consented to do so and directed us for 2 or 3 years. We went to Nashville 1975 for the praise sing, and our Singing Men of Texas sung under his leadership. They sung under his leadership for the evangelism conference for 2 or 3 years. Then we decided it would be more appropriate to emphasize and put our total emphasis into the satellite area, because it was difficult to bring our people together and to be able to provide for such wonderful leaders, Kurt Kaiser, the type of platform that we needed to do the job as a combined group. Now when we come together, we use either one of the satellite directors or an invited guest to be the director. Kurt did a wonderful job in helping us get started as a combined group. When Dr. Hooper Dillday began talking to me about the possibility of becoming director of the church music department, I discussed with him the 2 programs that I was very strongly interested in. One was leadership training, the other was spiritual enrichment. And we have tried through the years to build all of our programs around these 2 large areas. Leadership development, we have over 5,000 churches and missions in Texas. They need music leadership. They need people to play the instruments. It's just a wide open field. It's our responsibility to work with the churches developing this kind of thing. So the festival program is an indirect approach to leadership training. The regional workshops, the state music conference, all of these things are designed to provide leadership training for the churches. Spiritual enrichment, our ministry music retreat, our Singing Men of Texas program are designed to help strengthen the spiritual motivation of our music directors.
Tell us a little bit about your staff and those that have worked with you over these years.
Ronnie, the Lord has blessed us through the years with some fine men who've come into the department to work. When I first became director of the department, I invited Perry Taylor to come who was then the music assistant at First Baptist Church in Dallas. Perry came to the department to work in the area of children's work and did an exceptional job there. Along with Perry came Royce Dow from the First Baptist Church in Irving, and he served as our adult and youth leader. They were both general consultants. They served half the state working with Association of Music Directors. Each one took about 54 directors to work with, and this helped us very much, even though they had age group responsibility also. When Perry Taylor left the department, Harold Slack came from the First Baptist Church in Garland, where he was minister of music, and he served as our children's and preschool music consultant, as well as serving with working with the Association of Music Directors in half the state. After Perry Taylor came to the department, we invited Robert Hall to come and work with in our youth and adult area. And he came from First Baptist Church in Henderson, stayed for about 6 months and went back to that church. Robert had some health problems, felt a real calling to the local music ministry, and went back to serve the church, which he left. In fact, he's still there as minister of music. He's had a wonderful ministry there. When he left, Royce Dow came to work with us, and Royce and Perry and myself worked together for several years. I believe Royce was with us for about 11 years. Perry Taylor left, and Harold Slack came for a period of about 3 years, and then Don McCall came from the First Baptist Church in Irving, where he was serving as a minister of music. When Royce went into another business area, Neil Darnell came from the First Baptist Church in Wichita Falls and served his last 4 years. He retired after he had served for those 4 years. He retired from the work, moved back to Wichita Falls, and at that time they froze all of the vacancies in our convention offices, executive board staff, and we were not able to replace Neil at that time. So today it's Don McCall, Sam Prestidge, serving church music department.
Sam, it's my understanding from talking with Pete Forterhays that when he came in about 1954, there were not any full-time ministers of music. I have to assume, since you graduated and came into our area, that you were one of the first.
When I began as a music director in 1953 full-time, there were not many churches who had full-time just music positions. Thad Roberts, Malcolm Edwards, Cliff Baker, among several who served in our state. When I came to the department, of course, I had been a minister of music for something over 6 years. There were a number of churches now beginning to call full-time ministers of music. An interesting experience that Pete and I had one time driving across East Texas. We decided to see how many full-time music directors we could name without looking at any list. I was driving my little Volkswagen. Pete was sitting beside me with paper in hand, pencil. We wrote down 325 names without looking at any list. Of course, these were combination people, but they all were full-time, either music, music education, music and youth. So that it had grown that much in a period of 10 years. We have a wonderful heritage as church musicians. Of course, through the years, we've had Southwestern Seminary. We've had a wonderful music school there. We've had some fine music schools in our colleges. The church music department of the Baptist Sunday School Board has been very effective and very helpful to the states as we've tried to develop the program. The three people that I think have probably had more influence on church music during my ministry have been Pete Forterhays, Ewell Porter, and Jack Dean. the music camps, the music leadership training, the festival program was developed by these people. And they inspired many church music leaders through the years. And we have what we have today because of the foundation that they laid. I was privileged to be a part of the program with Pete Porter Hayes. His life and ministry has meant so much to me. And I tell people that if I have had any success in the work that I've done these recent years, it's been because of the opportunity of working with Pete and for his prayers that have followed my ministry through these years.
In 1994, it's my understanding that you plan to retire at the end of that year. If you had a prayer to pray for the future of church music after your retirement, what might that prayer be?
It would be that it would continue to grow the meaningful use of music in our worship services, the wonderful experience of outreach that we're having today through the music ministry. All of these things would continue to grow, and that the music department of the Baptist General Convention of Texas would have its greatest days ahead.
Amen.